親しい仲だからこそ、思いは素直に伝えるべきなんだ。
Tammy's law firm. You are alone in the office on a Friday night. The neon light shines through the window as you twirl around in your rotating chair, scrolling through your phone. You're not rushing to get home like most of your colleagues because you are waiting for Artem to get off work. There's a discount at the supermarket, $20 off if you spend $200. I'll check it out with Artem later. You are scrolling through the special offers when suddenly you receive an incoming call. Hello, good evening, Professor Garner. Ah, no. Auntie.
あれからずいぶん経つのに、まだ呼び慣れてないのね。
You hear Mrs. Garner's gentle laughter mixed with the occasional honk of a car horn from the other side of the line. Well, I haven't officially met Arthur's parents yet. Brian Wing has been in the capital recently, so you and Arthur haven't officially met his parents yet, only exchanging simple greetings. But right now, you're more concerned about the strange noises coming from the other side of the call. By the way, where are you now? It sounds like...
今はまだ首都よ。あと少しで学会の方も片付くと思うから、あさってには予定通り飛行機で帰るわ。
Mrs. Garner was said to be busy attending a summit organized by several universities in the capital. Artem and I will pick you up, send us your flight number later. How about having lunch together? We haven't seen each other in a while.
あら、どうやら同じことを考えていたようね。私が電話したのも実はそれが理由よ。ところで、シズマはまだ忙しいの？さっきから何度か電話してるんだけど出なくて。
Yeah, I think Artem is still in a meeting. I'm gonna go find him later.
会議中ね。通りで。
Mrs. Garner pauses for a moment, her voice becoming lighter.
さ、ならあの子に伝えておいて。あさって会いましょって。
After saying goodbye to Mrs. Garner, you head over to the conference room only to find it empty. Is Artem back in his office? You think to yourself as you walk toward Artem's office. Before you can knock on the door, you hear a loud noise coming from within.
俺の知ったことか。あんたは法廷に出るんだよ。
白木さん、声を荒げたところで問題の解決には。
問題がないだと？いいだろう。お前がそういう態度なら、こっちにだって考えがある。訴えられても文句は言うなよ。
The door in front of you bursts open and a man rushes out, almost bumping into your shoulder. In the office, Artem is crouching on the ground, picking up pieces of paper that had been thrown on the ground. Artem's office. Your body moves on its own, dashing inside to help Artem pick up the fallen pieces of paper.
あ、外にいたのか。彼とぶつかって怪我などしていないか。
Never mind me, Artem, who was that? How did he get out here? Artem gently pats your hand on the carpet. Afterward, he moves over beside you to pick up more papers.
私が入れたんだ。彼は私に依頼をしに来たんだが、あいにく今は一切手が空いてなくてな。他の弁護士を推薦したところ、ああなってしまった。
You frown in slight disbelief because that scene earlier didn't look like a disagreement over a case. Really? Is there anything I can do to help?
君もこれから忙しくなってしまうだろう。これ以上任せるわけにはいかないさ。
I haven't been busy lately, nor have I been working overtime.
日曜の会食の方だ。母からどう聞いているかはわからないが、君のことだから、その日は母を迎えに行ったり、食事の準備も自分でするつもりなんだろ？
What? Artem, you already knew? Your mother just called me. I thought you didn't know. Artem smiles, declining to comment.
家の習慣でな。私の両親は、ステラ市に出入りする際、必ず前もって私に連絡をよこしてくるんだ。それで、あさっては空いているか？
From some reason, you can feel his eyes wandering. To cheer him up, you poke him on the shoulder. Come over. Haven't I been staying with you on weekends? Why don't we stop by the supermarket? We need to stock up on ingredients.
すまないが、私は行けそうにない。この後も電話会議が残っているから、君は先に帰りなさい。
Damn Miss Lawfirm. In the silent office, you distractedly toss your belongings in your bag. Is Arthur really okay if I go home now? You glance thoughtfully out of the window to check the weather outside. That's... Through the flashing neon lights, you see a person downstairs, the same Mr. Hyland who just rushed out of Artem's office. You tense as you watch him pace nervously back and forth as if he is on a call with someone. Who in the world is he, and what did he want with Artem? Artem told me not to worry, but a client raging in Artem's office, it is a rare enough occurrence to set off alarm bells. You chew your lip in thought, but just then Mr. Hyland raises his hand. Something in it shines bright. He's taking photographs. Without any time to hesitate, you grab your bag and run toward the elevator. Law firm first floor.
今日こそ破滅させてやる。
What are you doing? You're here to talk to Artem about a case, right? I'm going to call security if you keep this up. The man looks at you with his phone hidden behind him.
依頼？たとえこの場で死ぬことになろうと、あいつに依頼することなんて二度とねえよ。
What do you mean?
あんたには関係ない。俺は左京に目に物を。
Mr. Hyland chokes up, looking frightened. You look in the direction where he's looking and see a security guard rushing over. By the time you look back, Mr. Hyland is nowhere to be found. Who the hell is he? Everything Mr. Hyland said was bizarre, but one thing is for certain. He didn't come to Artem about a kiss. It sounded more like a threat. But what's going on between him and Artem? I need to clear this up with Artem. You instinctively search for someone, subconsciously looking up at the brightly lit wall of clouds that stretches out into the night. However, you don't see Artem anywhere because he is standing somewhere close to you. Carrying a briefcase, he slowly emerges from trees hidden from the neon lights. Law firm first floor. You hurry over. Artem calls out to the security guard, says a few words, and looks at you. What are you doing here? Didn't you have a conference?
会議は中止になった。上から君たちの姿が見えたから、慌てて降りてきたんだ。
Cancel? Artem's tone remains gentle, but a strange feeling emerges in your heart. He pulls out his phone and looks at the screen, as if to prevent you from asking any more questions.
ああ、とにかく無事でよかった。ひとまず帰るとしよう。後のことは車内でゆっくり話す。それでいいか。
He takes your hand naturally. Everything returns to normal just like any other Friday night. However, he isn't walking in the direction of the garage, but to the noisy roadside. Didn't you drive to work today?
いや、今日はいろいろと疲れたからな。過労運転にならないよう、帰りはタクシーを呼ぶとしよう。ん？これはどういうことだ？
Artem taps his phone several times, frowning slightly. You chuckle and take a closer look at his phone. What has stopped the great Mr. Wing? Let me see. Shortage of taxis during evening rush hour. You are 19th and line.
先にどこかで夕食を済ませて、それからもう一度確認しようか。
I suppose we can, but... You stop talking. Artem seems to be upset about not being able to call a taxi, but you know it's more than that. How shall I get him to talk? He feels out of it at the moment. You look around absentmindedly and see a brightly colored bus pulling up. A sightseeing bus? The seemingly endless dreamlike lights of the city reflects off the side of the bus. There aren't many passengers on board. Staring at the bus makes an idea pop into your head.
どうし、
You pull Artem a couple of steps forward, and his arm noticeably stiffens when he realizes you're rushing toward the sightseeing bus. If we can't get a taxi, we can always take the bus.
だが、あれは方向が。
Yeah, I know. It's a 24-hour sightseeing bus that shuttles between the main attractions in the city center. Before Artem can hesitate further, you move closer and whisper to him in the same tone he spoke in before. We can talk about the rest in the car. That's what you said, right? Sightseeing bus. You lead Artem onto the sightseeing bus. Moving toward the back of the bus, countless lights dance on you and Artem, dragging the two of you into a trance. You scan the interior of the sightseeing bus and spot Artem smiling and waving at you from the back of the bus. When you sit down next to him, the faint gloom creeps back onto his face. Artem, are you still thinking about what happened back at the office?
やはりバレていたか。だが、本当に知りたいのか？はっきりとは言えないが、この件は間もなく解決。
Artem, what in the world happened? I don't need to be comforted. I need the truth. Under your earnest gaze, he can only respond with a nod.
すでに気づいているだろうが、白木さんは私に依頼の相談をしに来たわけではない。むしろ、私を訴えたいそうだ。
What? Despite having prepared yourself mentally, you still can't help but exclaim the moment Artem sees it. You look nervously at the other passengers on the bus and try to keep your voice down. What the reason? He...
ああ。私に名誉を傷つけられたからだそうだ。
How could that be? You would never do something like that. Artem doesn't respond. He looks at you with a mixture of guilt and discomfort in his eyes.
もし、本当に私のせいで彼がそういった被害を受けているとしたら、君は驚くか？
Artem moves closer to you as if he doesn't want anyone else to hear your conversation. The bus jerks from time to time, and before you know it, you are already snuggled closer to Artem.
君と同じくらいの年の頃に、一度だけ、白木さんの代理人弁護士として、 民事訴訟を起こしたことがあるんだ。一応勝訴にはなったが、白木さんは裁判所が出した結果に不満があったらしく、法廷で私と軽い口論になってな。実際、それ自体は大したことではなかったんだが、世論はそう捉えていなかったらしい。異常な速度で私と白木さんの個人情報が拡散され、特に彼の方は深刻な影響を受けてしまった。
Artem slightly avoids your gaze. For a moment, his eyes focus on the glow of the advertisement outside the window, but that warms past quickly.
多くの人が白木さんを裁判所荒らしと断じ、彼が若い弁護士に圧力をかけ、利益を得ようとしていると報じたんだ。一方、私は父親も母親も立場のある人間だから、悪いことなどできはしないと。結果、白木さんは非難に耐えかね行動した。私が法廷で言われたことを根に持ち、世論を操って中傷したとな。
Then what happened? It was just an argument, right? Artem looks down, touching his arm. A shiver starts to creep up your spine.
特になんともなかったが、少しだけつかみ合いになってな。彼はそのことで警察に連行され、拘留されると同時に私との依頼関係を解消したんだ。それ以来、白木さんは私に不満を抱き続け、私が身内のコネを利用して報復したと思い込んでいるらしい。だが、こちらから一度も相談していない以上、両親が何かをすることはない。私には考慮すべき利害関係が多く、軽率に口を開けば余計なトラブルを招いてしまう可能性があるからな。だからこそ、何もしていないのにどうしてそんなことが起きたのか、当時の私はわからなかった。
Artem suddenly smiles. He is clearly still living in the past, reliving the same emotion he experienced before.
結果、私は逃げたんだ。子供がそうするように。
You ran? Through the neon lights, you can imagine the color returning to the young man concealed by time. His former self had probably walked past these vibrant lights numerous times, and a few minutes ago, you too have walked where he had walked. At that time, he had no idea who he would meet in the future and sat quietly alone.
一人になれる場所を探し、何が起こったのか、誰が関わっているのか、落ち着いて考えたかったんだ。もう気づいていると思うが、その時の私が選んだ場所が、まさにこういった観光バスだった。
Artem, where was he sitting back then? In the same spot as you are right now, or where he's sitting now? His former self must have also been wrapped up in the scenery of this spectacular city, falling into a trance. There was no destination in mind. He was like a hatchling that just learned how to fly, landing in a temporary spot to rest.
幸い、バスの中にいたのは、写真を撮るのに忙しい観光客ばかりで、私を私だと認識している人物は一人もいなかった。彼らは、明日にはここを去るだろうし、写真以外のことでここに何があったかを覚えている人間はいないだろう。私は彼らの後ろに座り、見慣れた街を眺めていた。この景色の中に自分がいるような、いないような気がしながら。私はあの夜、様々な感情から距離を置く方法を、隠す術を学んだんだ。
Hide? You mean?
事実、私の境遇は特殊だ。親しい人に心配をかけないためにも、軽々しく人には明かせない。
That's why you remember the past before the two of you get together. You only discovered about Artem's family background after working at the firm for a while. Not long ago, he tried to convince you to put aside your concerns and trust that he could handle everything. Sightseeing bus. So what do you plan on doing? Fight Mr. Highland's lawsuit?
まだ考えているところだ。テミスのパートナー弁護士の一人が被告席に立てば、間違いなく、再び世論が騒ぎ出すだろう。とはいえ、白木さんを放置しておくわけにもいかない。まずは数年越しに訪ねてきた理由を明らかにしなければ。
Who can help you investigate? Together, we can. You quickly think about the possible countermeasures, but Artem shakes his head again.
君が言いたいことは分かっている。私の悩みを解決してくれようとしていることもな。だが、今は君の助けを必要とするほど深刻な状況ではないし、私はもう決めたんだ。君が巻き添えになる必要はない。
Artem's residence. Soon it's Sunday. After picking up Mrs. Garner, Artem busies himself in the kitchen.
この果物をリビングに運んでくれるか。
Ah, sure. You close your eyes and yawn. When you open your eyes again, Artem is walking toward you with his hand wiped clean. If I had known, I wouldn't have stayed up 2 nights in a row. Artem reassures you that you don't have to worry about him and Mr. Highland. However, you still search online for information out of curiosity. What a joke. I've heard about medical professionals being harassed, but legal professionals, attorneys have it rough. They got beat up when they're just doing their jobs. Are you talking about this person? I found something interesting. I found the target outside an elementary school. Lol, is he picking someone up? I feel bad for the scumbag's children. Invalid photo. Probably due to lack of sleep, your temple begins to throb with pain after reading these outrageous discussions. The latest post was posted this year. Has Mr. Highland been harassed all these years? It seems like the public is also harassing his family. Is this why he came to settle a score with Artem? You absentmindedly place the fruit in front of Mrs. Garner. She quickly looks up and moves to the other side of the sofa.
ありがとう。あなたも少しは座って休んだら。ずっと忙しくしてるみたいだし。
No, I'm not tired. It's just... Reason tells you that you should let Mr. Garner know what happened with Artem, but... Should I be the one who brings this up? It's something that Artem has yet to overcome. Maybe it's better that I let him handle it. But if it drags on any longer... Mrs. Garner notices your silence and a hint of confusion appears on her face.
あなた、
It's nothing. I was just thinking about Artem. And what Artem was like before I met him. Things like that.
なんだ、そんなことを気にしてたの？そうね。
Mrs. Garner motions for you to sit down beside her again. The moment you sink into the soft cushion, she shows you a gentle expression of helplessness.
あなたくらいの年の頃、少なくとも私の目には、バランスを保つのがすごく得意な人間に見えたわ。
Balance?
ええ、プライベートと仕事、それから家庭をはっきり分けていて、この3つが互いに干渉しないよう心がけていたの。例えば、家族の前で仕事の話は一切しなかったし、私生活における悩みが仕事に影響することもなかった。多分、それがあの子の長所なのかもね。すべてのことをきちんと整理することができて、わずかな心の乱れも調整できる。私が知る限り、このバランスを崩しかけたのはたったの一度だけよ。
Huh? You mean... Mrs. Gardner looks over you to Artem, who was still in the kitchen. Making sure Artem won't hear her, she smiles and pats you on the back of your hand.
ようやくこれをあなたに話す時が来たわね。けどその前に、あの子に内緒にするって約束してくれる？
Artem's parents' home. Mrs. Garner's narration takes you back to a few years ago, overlooking her sitting in the living room. The instant she hears a knock on the door, Mrs. Garner gets up from the sofa and rushes to the door. As she pushes the door open, Artem's figure gradually emerges. He looks down, making it hard to see his expression.
シズマ、どうしてこんなに帰りが遅いの？鍵、持ってなかったの？
Mrs. Garner noticed that Artem's hair and shoulders are slightly wet and stretches out her arm to touch them, but he takes a step back.
心配しなくていい。外を歩いていたら雨に降られただけだ。
そう。でも今後は一言入れてよ。出ないと心配するから。疲れたでしょ。ホットミルクを入れるわね。食事は済ませた？
Watching his father about to leave, Artem suddenly speaks up.
すまない。ちょっといいか。実は。
Artem's voice gradually fades. Mrs. Garner is surprised at first, but soon smiles and consoles Artem.
ゆっくり話して。いくらでも待つから。そうだ。ちょうど時間もあることだし、久々に映画でも見る？
But even when they sit down on the sofa, Artem still seems distracted. He doesn't say anything, even though the television is playing the old movie he found recently. On the flashing screen, the protagonist is framed and forced to work on an ocean freighter. The lights of the land seems like a distant dream. There is only the endless rain and the roar of the sea in the black and white shot.
悔しいでしょうね。
何がだ？
映画の話よ。相手のために行動していただけなのに、感謝されるどころか逆に非難され、挙句陥れられたんだもの。
Despite talking about the movie, Mrs. Garner turns to Artem. The hand resting on her knee twitches, perhaps realizing Artem was much too old to have his head patted. She sighs gently.
でも、別の角度から見れば、こういうことも人が成長する過程で経験すべきことなのかもしれないわね。私たちにできることは、
ああ、わかってる。責任と危険は隣り合わせだ。だからこそ、様々な利害関係を慎重に考慮し、複雑なバランスを保っていく必要がある。でなければ、自分の大切な人を守ることはできない。
そういう捉え方もできるけど、私が言いたいのは、
Mrs. Garner did not continue. The phone in Artem's pocket vibrates, creating a noise loud enough to drown out the movie.
すまない。少し席を外す。
He looks again at the movie playing. The protagonist was facing a rope in the storm. He and Artem seemed to lock eyes for only a moment.
映画は、また今度見るとしよう。
Artem's residence. At this moment, you are pulled back to reality, where you smell the aroma of food. But Mrs. Garner seems to be stuck in the past, a look of regret ever present in her eyes.
実を言うと、全部気づいていたのよ。あの時の静馬があんな顔していたのは、例の依頼人と衝突していたからだって。だから、一緒に映画でも見ながら諭してあげようとしたんだけど、どうやら誤解させちゃったみたい。多分だけどあの子は、私にカツを入れられたとしか思ってないでしょうね。
So that's what happened.
なんて言ったらいいか。日常の楽しいことや辛いことを遠慮なく話し合える、そんな機会が私たちにはずっと欠けていたみたい。シズマも自分に対する要求が高いのか、それとも人に迷惑をかけたくないのかは知らないけど、私に助けを求めてくることなんてめったにないから、今回こそはどうしてもこの件を解決してあげたいの。
Could it be? Ah! You reflect on what Mrs. Garner said and cover your mouth. Mr. Garner smiles.
そうよ。シズマが例の依頼人に今も絡まれてることは知ってるわ。だからこうして首都から会いに来たの。私の方でもいろいろと調べてみたけど、多分役に立てると思う。まあ、今回も同じことになる可能性は高いけど。
You don't want to see the gloomy expression on Mrs. Garner's face anymore, so you finish the sentence for her. Leave it to me. I was just thinking about how to handle this as well. But before I try to convince him, I want to ask you a few questions. Is that okay?
あら、もちろんいいわよ。どういう作戦なの？私の助けも必要？
You think for a moment, then shake your head firmly. Don't worry, the only thing you need to do is to call us before you go to bed as usual. Artem's residence. Later that night, you and Artem returned home after dropping his mother off at her place. There is still the faint aroma of food in the living room. As you take off your coat, you feel Artem's hand on your shoulders.
コートは私が預かる。君はこのまま風呂に入って、先に休んでくれ。
Hugh, I'm beat. But before I do, I want to relax for a while. You look at the unlit corridor at the far end of the living room and motivate yourself quietly. Before Artem takes the coat from you, you quickly turn around and grab his wrist. Come with me. Home theater. A few minutes later, you are curled up on the sofa under a thin blanket as Artem adjusts the DVD player.
まったく君は、映画が見たいならそう言えばいいだろう。
I was embarrassed because your mother was here. That's a white lie, of course. Earlier that day, you confirmed a few things with Mrs. Garner.
夜間高校。これが見たいのか？
You nod frantically. Night Voyage was the same movie that Artem and his mother watched that night. Artem's expression didn't change at all when he picked up the DVD, maybe because it's been so long since he first saw the movie. After pressing play, he sits down on the sofa beside you, and you share half the blanket with him. But soon you snuggle closer to him, the folds in the blanket unfurling. Artem looks at you.
寒いのか？エアコンの温度を調整しよ
No, I just want to cuddle. So you won't run off like you did back then. Artem seems to smile in the dark room, his hand moving under the blanket to interlock with your fingers. The screen lights up before you, and just as Mrs. Garner said, the protagonist is working hard on an ocean fighter after being freed.
う。これは。
You feel Artem's hand stiffens under the blanket, and your heart skips a beat. He stares at the screen in surprise and sits up straight.
思い出した。何年か前にも私はこの映画を見ている。が、最後までは見ていなかった。君がこれを選んだのは偶然か？それとも。
Artem, his instinct is to ask you for confirmation, but you stop him gently. Let's just watch the movie from start to finish, okay? Like Artem, you know little about Night Voyage. Since it's a black and white movie, there is no synopsis online. But Mrs. Garner chose this movie to educate Artem, so it must have a special meaning. The answer must be hidden in the movie somewhere. Where though? Both you and Artem stare intently at the screen, watching the movie with great interest. What?
こういう話だったとはな。
Just when you two thought the protagonist was done for, he had secretly learned the lamp signals that ships use to communicate with each other. Then one night, when the ship was hit by extreme weather, he rushed to the signal light amidst all the confusion to signal the nearest lighthouse. In the chaos, he relayed a message not only to ask for help, but also about what had happened to him on the ship.
陸地との通信手段が全て断たれていたにもかかわらず、灯火による信号という技術を学び、自力で助けを求めたのか。助けを求める。
Artem mutters to himself, you snuggle closer to him, resting your head on his shoulder while whispering. Artem, don't you think the lamp signals are amazing? As long as a person is willing to ask others for help, that person can allow others to understand the situation, even without words. For example, the thin blanket is unable to conceal the movement of your right hand. The bumps in the blanket move slowly, brushing against the back of Artem's hand as he selects stance.
何をしているんだこれは。
You start teasing him by tapping on his pants with your finger under the blanket. As long as you tap in a certain rhythm, you can achieve the same effect as lamp signals, right? For example, these signals mean we want to help you.
そういうことか。
Artem's wrist land on your neck at irregular intervals, but your hand keeps tapping. Let me finish. If I tap like this, it means don't keep everything to yourself. No matter what happened in the past or present, it wasn't your fault, and you never did anything wrong. Since that's the case, why don't you put up with it alone?
これが君の透過信号ということか。
I guess, after all, I had a kiss earlier, and the client wanted me to relay a few messages to you. Things that she wanted to say to you but never got the chance.
少し前。それは母のことか。
You open your mouth to say something, but a phone vibrates at the same time, distracting you and Artem. Mrs. Garner's name appears on Artem's phone.
本当に。
While Artem looks at his screen, still deep in thought, you stand up and silently walk behind him. Before he can look back at you, you hug him tenderly, feeling his every breath. Artem, I'm really happy that you do everything you can to protect the people you love from danger, to keep us from being affected by what's going on at work. But I'd rather see you break the balance once in a while. I want you to cast away your doubts and worries and tell me what's on your mind. It doesn't matter if they are burdensome. We love you and we're all ready to help you with anything. So, please. The phone dims, lighting up at irregular intervals in the darkness, almost like the lamp signals in the movie. Artem's hand hovers over the screen, not knowing what to do. Tammy's negotiation room. A week later. Even though it's Saturday, you arrive at the firm early and make the final preparations in the conference room booked in advance. Last week, after Artem talked over the phone with his mother, he scheduled a meeting with Mr. Highland, Artem's residence. Although you were calm in leaving the home theater to give Artem privacy to talk to his mother, but it's impossible not to worry. You pace outside the room until you hear the sound of a knob turning. Artem, did you guys talk?
ああ、いろいろと話してきた。
Artem seems to think of something, but he doesn't avoid your gaze this time. After a brief pause, he speaks again.
来週末、君も一緒に事務所に来てほしい。白木さんともう一度話をしようと思う。
Artem never told me about his conversation with his mother in the home theater. Did he ask her for help, or has he decided we're enough to handle Mr. Highland? Whatever happens, the only thing you can do now is support him. You quickly check the documents to make sure everything is there while going over a few things about Mr. Highland in your mind. Soon, two shadows breeze past the wall of glass as Arthur pushes open the doors. Artem nods at you, signaling for you to sit down with him and Mr. Highland.
では、始めましょう。
Auntie isn't here. The area outside the conference room is eerily silent. You gather your composure and look at the two men in front of you. The talk seems to be progressing normally, and Artem is explaining the mediation proposal he had prepared during the week. But you glance over at the other end of the long table where Mr. Highland is shaking his leg.
そこで、当方の提案についてですが。
また提案か。ああ？今さらとぼける必要がどこにある？
Mr. Highland suddenly changes his posture and stomps his foot on the ground.
俺がどれだけ嫌がらせを受けてきたか、お前は誰よりも分かってるだろう。
白木さん、お電話で落ち着いてお話ししたいと申し上げたはずです。これまでのように口論するのではなく。
落ち着けだと？この状況で落ち着いてなどいられるか？こうして話している間にも。
Who knows, maybe someone other than you is suffering from harassment too?
なんだと？
Mr. Highland looks at you, enraged. You don't back down, flipping the documents in your hands to another page. Mr. Highland, I did a little digging. You and your family were harassed due to what happened that year, right?
だとしたらなんだ？
You should have gone through the legal process of dealing with the harassment. Why wait until now? Ever since your first encounter with Mr. Highland, this question has been burning in your mind. Why didn't Mr. Highland report the incident to the police? Instead, he chose the more risky decision of threatening Artem despite the chance of security guards kicking him out.
理由なんてない。来ようと思ったタイミングで来ただけだ。それに、家族がどうだろうと、お前らには関係ないだろ
う。They are also victims in need of help, so Mr. Wing has the right to ask. You take a deep breath and look at Artem again. He nods. You take it as a sign to continue your questioning. Mr. Highland, do you have something to hide?
何？
Artem isn't the only one in the conference room with something to hide. Artem already told you his reason for hiding the truth. So what about Mr. Highland? What does he have to say?
白木さん、私には敵意の類はありませんし、あなたに話すことを強要したりもしません。ただ、もし本当に この件に終止符を打ちたいのであれば、一番にすべきは、ネット上で騒ぎ立てている人物を止めることでした。ですが、あなたはそれをせず、私を起訴することを選んだ。私は、その背後にある理由を知りたいのです。仮に、あなたが何かしらの事態に直面していた場合、我々には的確な法律扶助の準備があります。もし、私のことが信用できないのでしたら、隣にいる彼女の方でも同様に。
あんたには関係ないと言ってるだろう
Mr. Highland moves irritably on the sofa, not hearing what Artem said. But Artem leans forward, speaking in a quite quicker tone.
白木さん、もう一度申し上げます。あなたとご家族の状況については、
家族を巻き込もうとするなさもないと
Mr. Highland stands up. His leg bangs against the table, and just as he's about to grab Artem's collar,
お待ちください。
the door to the conference room is open as a familiar figure rushes inside. For a moment, everyone stops moving and stares at Mrs. Garner, who is still trying to catch her breath.
間に合ったよね。シズマが会議室にいるとしか言わないから、ずいぶんと迷ったわ。
今度は母親と一緒に俺を脅そうってか
いいえ、私はあなたと交渉しに来たわけではありません。同じく人を育てた親として、誤解を解きに来ただけです。まず、事件の被害者はあなた一人だけではありません。当時の件は他方に影響を及ぼし、様々な問題を引き起こしました。
問題だと
Mrs. Garner looks over at you, still shocked by the turn of events. Then she exchanges a quick look with Arthur.
わかった。言われた通り、私たちは外で待つとしよう。
Before, so you and your mother... You are left with a sense of shock, overcoming the nervousness in the moments prior with Mr. Highland as you look at Artem. Artem continues smiling without saying anything.
ああ、そう思ってくれていい。だが実際は他にも続きは外に出てからにしよ
う。待って。
Hearing Mrs. Garner's voice behind you, you turn your head back, but she doesn't look at you. Just as you wonder if she's talking to you or Artem, you notice her relaxed shoulders.
ありがとう。今度、また一緒にあの映画を見ましょうね。
Time is law firm. Through the glass one side of the conference room, you can clearly see the situation inside, but the voices are unclear. Mr. Highland seems agitated in the beginning, and Mrs. Garner talks quickly. He eventually sits back down on the sofa. Mrs. Garner takes out a stack of documents from her bag and shows them to him. You are about to breathe a sigh of relief when Mr. Highland suddenly covers his face.
俺だって仕方がなかったんだあの人が
What's going on? What happened to him? You take a step toward the glass when you feel a sudden pressure on your hand. Artem had been holding your hand ever since the two of you left the office. Even now, instead of letting go, he holds your hand tighter.
会話の内容が気になるんだろう。私もそうだ。だが、それを確認しに行く前に、私にも言わせてほしい。そのくらいの時間なら、母もきっと分かってくれるだろ
う。He takes a deep breath and moves his lips close to your ear. At that moment, you feel his nose brush faintly against the scattered hair on that side of your face.
ありがとう。私も君にはとても感謝している。
After being together for so long, there's no need to thank each other. This is what I wanted to do.
親しい仲だからこそ、思いは素直に伝えるべきなんだ。これまでの私はずっと、家族や恋人にこそ、自分の弱さを見せてはいけないと思ってきた。だが、君が教えてくれたんだ。弱さや悩みを打ち明けることは、互いの絆を深めることにつながるのだと。孤独な船は遠くまでは行けない。互いの絆を守り続けて初めて、その船は進む力を得られるんだ。
Artem, now you look down to see his hand gently squeezing yours.
一緒に戻ろう。そろそろ明らかになった真相が聞けるはずだ。
City center. By the time the meeting ends, the city is once again lit up by neon lights. By mutual agreement, you called Mr. Hyden's family a few hours ago. Mrs. Garner had to leave because something came up at the university. Considering it was dinner time, the meeting was moved to a downtown restaurant. You looked through the sliding glass door at the restaurant and quickly walked over to Artem after he paid the bill. How's the situation? What else did Mr. Hyland say to you?
随分と穏やかになり、ご家族に対する法律扶助の件も同意してくれたから、ひとまず私を訴えることはないだろう。もちろん確証はないが、これでいい。彼らが話していた人物や出来事を調べる時間ができただけでも、今は良しとしよ
う。According to Mr. Hyland's family, you and Artem confirmed a few facts. An anonymous person contacted Mr. Hyland saying that if he approached Artem and caused a big scene like before, not only would he help Mr. Hyland resolve the constant harassment that has been going on for years, but he would also be substantially rewarded. Whoever did this is still out there, but this means without a doubt that this mysterious man was likely to be involved in that incident a few years ago. We just need to find that man, and then you can finally put an end to what happened, right?
そうだな。あの時の真相がはっきりすれば、弱歩きしていた私の過去も清算できるだろ
う。Then we need to move fast and...
急ぐことはない。私たちはすでに相手の一手をくじくことに成功しているからな。それに、このことは私たちだけの問題でもない。今後、白木さん一家が調査に協力してくれれば、いずれすべて解決するだろう。
Just then, you hear a small buzzing sound. Artem takes out his phone, immediately revealing a hapless smile.
母からだ。大学での用事を済ませた後、そのまま私たちの家に行き、こちらの帰りを待っているそうだ。
Has she been waiting long? We have to hurry. Thankfully, you and Artem are not far from home. The moment you pull Artem forward, the night wind whistles in your ear. The passers-by and buildings pass quickly, the glowing neon light stretching endlessly into the thick night. The next moment, a moist heat dissipates the coolness of the evening breeze, leaving a mark on your forehead. Artem, watch where you're going so you don't fall.
大丈夫だ。遅かれ早かれ、いずれは君が私の一番行きたい場所に連れて行ってくれるだろうからな。だから、もう少しゆっくり走ろう。今はまだ君に話しておきたいことがある。
Artem gradually slows his pace.
少し前、君は私に母と何を話していたのかと聞いてきたが、すまない。あの時は恥ずかしくて言えなかったんだ。あの晩、私が母に話したのは、ここ最近の問題だけではなく、もっと昔の私たちが会う前のことも話していてな。 観光バスに乗って市の中心を当てどなく回っていたとき、私は全てから距離を置きたい一心だったが、心の奥底では誰かに見つけてほしいと思っていたんだ。
Listening to him, you can't help moving closer to him and holding his wrist. I wish I could have met you sooner. As if in response to your reply, he rubs his finger lovingly against the scattered hair on your forehead once more.
それから前に君が事務所の前で白木さんと睨み合っていたとき、私は単に心配しただけじゃなく、何かが胸の奥底で目覚めるように急に悟ったんだ。何年も前に観光バスに乗ったあの瞬間から、私はずっとこの人を待っていたんだと。それまで外したことのない私の鎧を脱がし、つい隠してしまう本当の気持ちに気づいてくれる。そんな君のことをな。大抵の人間がそうであるように、私の隠し事も一つだけではない。
There are still other things.
そうだな。君に話していないことはまだたくさんあって、これは矛盾している感情かもしれないが、好きだからこそ口をつぐむことがあるというのに、結局は相手を愛しているからこそ何もかも話したくなってしまう。家に着いたらまた母とのおしゃべりに付き合ってくれるか。この先もそういったことは増えてくると思うが、君にはずっと私のそばで私たちの聞き手を務めてほしいと思っている。
Of course, why wouldn't I be willing to stay beside you? The lights across the street suddenly turns red. You and Artem are forced to stop and catch your breath. You brush aside the hair that is strewn across your face, catching a glimpse of a group of students eyeing you curiously. Have they never seen adults running so widely before? You and Artem exchange a look, almost bursting out in laughter.
確かにここまで走ったのは久しぶりだ。それこそ体育の授業ぶりか。あれは。
Artem stares across the street in surprise. Someone in the crowd is waving at you and Artem. Isn't that Auntie? Artem fails to answer you. The side of him that is most relaxed has just been fully exposed to his mother, and he is still holding onto your hand tightly. It's not like we just started dating. Why are you blind? Letting your parents see us relaxed in a sense is also revealing what's been kept hidden.
そうだな。こういったことも考えを改める必要がありそうだ。
Despite saying that, he still clutched tightly onto your hand. This awkward formality is the type that arouses the deepest desire within you. The red lights have always been bright, and cars pass endlessly in front of you and Artem, blocking the view across the road. Instinctively trying to resist everything that is happening, you look at Artem. Both of you stand on the edge of surging neon lights, almost being dragged into them, completely immersed in the dazzling world before you. Artem.
わかっている。この一件がどんな終わりを迎えようと、最後まで一緒に歩んでいこ
う。Your heart keeps beating faster and faster, and you shake your head. No, I'm not talking about that. Artem, have you ever tried?
え?
The answer is clear. You and Artem only get intimate in places with relative privacy, such as his home theater. But looking at his unclear expression bathed in neon lights, you feel a strange courage blooming in your chest. Whether it's confronting someone or quietly reaching out to him in the home theater, that emotion seems to be everywhere, never going away. The red lights on the opposite street blink several times. You look at the signals before smiling gaze gently. Nothing. I know the answer. Of course you haven't kissed in a place like this. As you spoke, you pressed your lips against his slightly parted lips, feeling his cool, moist breath. At this moment, a sightseeing bus pulls up slowly in front of you and Artem.
おはよう。そこはバス停か？休日だからまだ寝ているかと思ったが。事務所に書類を？例の案件のことか。それなら別に急ぐ必要はない。それよりも私の家に来てくれ。先日の白木さんの件に進展があったから君にも共有しておきたい。先ほど電話で知らせを聞いたとき、なんていうか、焦ってすぐにでも君に電話をかけそうになった。話を聞いてくれる君を想像すると、思わず心が揺れて、これまで以上に恋しくなってしまうんだ。ならタクシーで来る？ゆっくりでいい。まだ掃除中で、プールが片付いてないからな。ああ、水を入れ替えたんだ。まだあまりうまくできなくて、また服を濡らしてしまったが。だが、不測の事態のおかげで、奇妙な自然現象を見つけられた。ホースを使って、特定の方向に水をまくと、虹を作れることがあって、さらに、君が来てから話すとしよう。付き合いが長くなれば、分かち合いたいことも多くなるんだな。隠し事だけでなく、取り留めのないようなことまで、すべて聞いてほしくなる。このままずっと話していたいが、プールを片付けないとな。これでは君を呼べなくなってしまう。ホースを片付けないでほしい？そのつもりだったさ。君の表情を見た時から興味があるのは分かっていた。やり方は教える。近くまで来たら教えてくれ。迎えに行く。